Welcome to Shawn's Thoughts. Today I have something a little bit different. See, recently I've taken up upon myself to turn some of my previous podcasts into articles for a platform called Substack. So you may find that essentially linked to my channel on Substack in the description below. Well, today what I want to do is do something a little bit different. I essentially created a private podcast and then I converted that into an article, which I recently, this morning, published on Substack. So what I'd like to do today is I'd like to read that article for you. So I've chosen this location inside of this batter's box in my hometown of Surrey. And hello, how are you doing? And today I would love to read this article that I have essentially published on Substack. I highly encourage you, if and after you've listened to this live stream, to go over to Substack and support the article there. And before we get started, I want to ask something of you. I would like to ask that, we live in a world where there's so many different things that are happening, so many different experiences or essentially opportunities to utilize one's attention. So what I'd like you to do is, if you don't mind, to stop right now and to share this particular video and or anything else that I have created on my YouTube channel or wherever it is that you're viewing this from. I do have access or places on many different platforms. So wherever it is that you are viewing this from, I ask you to please share and share as much, or at least share one thing. This video could just be that one thing. To stop right now and share it at least once to whoever it is. Even if it's a random account to some random comment on some video that you've put in, the more that we begin to share that which, promotes the life and the reality that we would prefer, the stronger and more effective we are when we're co-creating our reality. So if you want to do that, definitely. If you don't, you can always just go and comment and all those lovely stuff. With regards to comments, even though this is a live stream, be aware that it's my camera phone which is recording what I'm essentially looking into right now. And so therefore I'm unable to see any of the comments on there. So if you do have a comment that you wish to leave, of course, return to the video. And if you put the comment in the video, I will have a chance to see it, versus any comments that are on the live stream are more for the community to discuss while I'm essentially reading the script that I've published this morning. So with all that being said, please understand if I don't read a comment right away. Realize that the camera is about almost 1.5 meters away from me, so I don't have access to the actual screen. It's just the way that the situation is right now. Perhaps in the future I'll have a proper studio where I can interact and engage a little bit better. But this particular live stream is more just about, sharing on a live audience and reading in real time, meaning right now at this moment of time. If you're here, I'm sitting in a batter's box in the playground of my elementary school some 3-4 decades ago. So thank you so much, and let's get to the reading. So this article is titled "Homelessness is a Manufactured Crisis." Subtitle: Government bureaucracy created the problem, and has no real intention of solving it, by Shawn Pederson. A first-person examination of homelessness, addiction, land access, economic insecurity, and the bureaucratic system that shapes them. Sometimes, to truly understand a situation, we have to experience at least some part of it ourselves. My position is direct. Government bureaucracy has helped create this crisis, continues to intensify it, and, at the highest levels, has no genuine intention of permanently solving the conditions it has orchestrated. For years, homelessness was something I witnessed from outside, Like many people, I saw individuals walking through major cities, sleeping in doorways, gathering in encampments, struggling with addiction, or attempting to survive outside a system that governs nearly every aspect of modern life. After spending several weeks traveling and camping because I had to, while also deliberately seeking places where I could live more freely and independently, my perspective changed. I began to understand how difficult society has made it for anyone to exist outside its monetary, bureaucratic, and institutional structures. There may be compassionate individuals working inside social programs who sincerely want to help. There may be volunteers, outreach workers, healthcare providers, and local organizations doing everything they can. My criticism is directed towards the larger structure and those responsible for designing its priorities. The public has repeatedly shown governments announcing programs to combat homelessness, yet the underlying condition continues to worsen. More money is spent, more bureaucracies are created, more announcements are made, and more people still end up living in the streets. At some point, we have to ask ourselves whether repeated failure is truly accidental. The people who fall outside of the system. Homeless never has only one cause. Some people have fallen through the cracks because of poverty, family breakdown, trauma, illness, job loss, housing costs, or circumstances they could never have anticipated. Some have become dependent on substances, occasionally through their own choices, and sometimes through situations that began with the medical system. Others are people who simply cannot or will not fully conform to the system surrounding them. They may be outliers. They may recognize injustices that others have learned to tolerate. They may be unwilling to compromise who they are to merely fit in a structure that feels fundamentally wrong to them. This does not describe every homeless person. It does, however, describe part of the population that becomes labeled, marginalized, and pushed aside because it has difficulty functioning within the expectations of the majority. People are grouped together under one label, the homeless. That label erases the enormous differences between them. One person may be struggling with severe addiction. Another may be working and living out of a vehicle. Another may have lost their home after a financial crisis. Another may be attempting to live nomadically. Another may be attempting to seek freedom from a monetary system that requires constant participation simply to remain alive. When we pretend they all arrived in the same situation for the same reason, we make it nearly impossible to develop meaningful solutions. Addiction is being managed rather than healed. The government's response to addiction is one of the clearest examples of the problem. In Canada, programs have been created to provide drugs to people already experiencing dependency. These programs are presented as compassionate measures intended to reduce immediate harm. From my perspective, however, continually supplying substances without creating an effective pathway out of the addiction does little to restore the person's life. It manages the condition without resolving it. I question whether there ever was a serious intention at the highest levels to help people become completely free of these substances. When a system keeps people dependent while calling that dependency care, we have to examine the results rather than simply accepting the language used to describe the program. There is also a role of pharmaceutical drugs. For some people, addiction began with medication prescribed after the injury, surgery, or painful medical condition. They became dependent on the feeling produced by the drug. When the prescription ended, the dependency remained. Some then searched for another way to obtain the same relief or high. That progression can lead to harder drugs, overdoses, violence, deteriorating health, fractured relationships, unemployment, and eventually homelessness. The system may describe these outcomes as individual failures, yet we should examine the institutions that introduced highly addictive substances, withdrew them after dependency had developed, and then often offer very little help for people to truly fully recover. If society genuinely wanted to reduce homelessness, it would place a far greater emphasis on healing addiction rather than maintaining it. Welfare is survival, not a solution. Giving someone a welfare payment and then sending them back into the same environment does little to change the conditions that produce their suffering. For someone caught in a cycle of dependency, a small payment may simply provide enough money to continue that cycle. For someone seeking employment, it may cover only a fraction of the cost of food, transportation, clothing, communication, and housing. The person survives another month while remaining trapped in the same situation. A real solution would provide opportunities, training, meaningful work, community, and a pathway towards having a home. Imagine creating a construction program specifically designed to employ people experiencing homelessness. Participants could receive professional training while helping build housing that they might one day eventually occupy. They could work on larger projects during the day, earn money for food and immediate necessities, and contribute part of their labor or income towards a smaller residential development connected to the program. They would gain skills. They would earn an income. They would participate in building something tangible. Most importantly, they would be helping construct their own future. That would be considerably more beneficial than maintaining people through temporary payments while leaving the causes of their homelessness untouched. The people designing the policies rarely understand the experience. One of the greatest problems with government responses to homelessness is that the people designing the policies are usually far removed from the experience. Politicians may live in $1 million or multi-million-dollar homes. They receive salaries that are far beyond what most people earn. They have offices, staff members, transportations, expense accounts, communication teams, and numerous forms of institutional support. They then attempt to solve the lives of people who have nowhere safe to sleep. They may tell carefully prepared stories intended to demonstrate that they understand ordinary people. They may speak about compassion, affordability, addiction, housing, and mental health. Yet, very few have personally experienced what it means to search for legal place to sleep when nearly every available space has been regulated, monetized, restricted, or closed. Economic disparity creates an enormous distance between the policymakers and the people affected by their decisions. A person surrounded by security and financial stability may understand homelessness intellectually. That is different from understanding what it feels like to carry everything you own, search for water, look for a washroom, avoid being moved by authorities, and wondering where you'll sleep that night. To understand a problem deeply enough to solve it, we need meaningful participation from the people living within the challenge, not merely people administering from offices. The people who helped create the conditions cannot be the only people trusted to correct them. Our planet is our home. During my own recent travels, I began thinking differently about the word homeless. I have been camping because circumstances required it. At the same time, I wanted to camp. I wanted to explore off-grid locations that existed outside the constant demands of the monetary system. In one sense, I had less of a conventional home. In another sense, this entire planet is our home. The concrete structures, the property boundaries, permits, fees, closing times, and regulations surrounding us are all artificial constructs. The forests, mountains, rivers, lakes, and lands existed long before governments claimed authority over them. Yet, attempting to live among these natural spaces revealed how few genuine options remain. Governments have taken campsites and monetized them. Provincial parks, regional parks, and many recreational areas frequently have fees, booking times, restrictions, closing hours, and rules prohibiting tents or overnight stays. Areas surrounding highways and communities have been designated as crown land or parkland, accompanied by limits of how long people can even remain. Even remote spaces can require permits, registrations, licenses, or payments. The method becomes clear. People may speak about living freely, yet every yet nearly every practical method of doing so has been restricted. When every place has a price, a person seeking to live outside the city still needs food, water, shelter, and some degree of safety. Fishing may require a license. The number and type of fish that can be kept is often regulated. Camping may require a fee. Remaining in one place may be prohibited after a certain number of days. Some wilderness areas have additional registrations or charges. Each restriction may have its individual explanation. Conservation matters. Wildlife protection matters. Responsible land use matters. Preventing destruction and long-term environmental damage matters. Yet, collectively, these regulations bind people to the monetary system. To legally obtain food, occupy land, camp, travel, or receive assistance, a person is repeatedly required to pay, register, report, apply, file, or comply. Even government assistance requires participation in the bureaucracy. People may need identification, an address, forms, tax records, appointments, bank accounts, and an ongoing communication with various agencies. Someone who wishes to live independently of the system discovers that the system has claimed authority over nearly every space they could go. When people are prevented from living in the outskirts of the city, restricted from remaining in parks, removed from undeveloped land, and unable to afford formal campgrounds, they are pushed back towards metropolitan centers. They gather near spaces where they can access food, water, washrooms, transportation, healthcare, shelters, and occasional employment. The government then points to the concentration of homeless in urban areas, though it has appeared spontaneously. The reality of tent communities. Cities such as Vancouver demonstrate what happens when people are pushed into increasingly limited areas. East Hastings has become one of the most visible examples. People gather there because they need to remain near resources and opportunities. They may also find a degree of protection and belonging among those who are experiencing the same conditions. Then the encampment becomes large enough to disturb businesses, residents, visitors, or people considered influential. Complaints begin. Authorities arrive. Tents are removed and possessions are displaced, and the community is broken apart. The people are rarely given a lasting alternative. They are simply moved somewhere else until their presence becomes visible again. This creates the appearance of action without solving anything. Many people living in tent communities are simply attempting to remain close enough to society to obtain food, water, work, healthcare, or assistance while living independently as their circumstances allow. At the same time, there is another side of the issue that must be acknowledged. Some people leave garbage, damaged belongings, drug-related materials, and torn open waste bags behind. Natural areas and public spaces can be harmed. This behavior creates resentment and gives everyone attempting to live outside the conventional system a negative reputation. Freedom requires responsibility. People seeking the freedom to live on the land must also respect the land, remove their waste, protect wildlife, prevent fires, and avoid leaving destruction behind. These concerns deserve practical responses. They do not justify eliminating every legal place where people have the right to, with limited money to live. Manage camping communities, sanitation facilities, waste collection, clean water, fire-safe systems, shared responsibilities, and access to employment could address these concerns far more effectively than repeated displacement. Immigration and the abandonment of existing citizens. Canada continues to welcome people from other countries while many people already living here lack housing, healthcare access, employment opportunities, and meaningful support. New arrivals may be brought into the country without receiving the tools they need to build stable homes. These places additional pressure on housing, social services, employment, and community resources. The issue is neither the worth of immigrants nor the claim that one group deserves dignity over another. The issue is whether a government can responsibly expand the population while abandoning the people who are already struggling and while failing to adequately support many of the people it brings in. When housing and infrastructure are already insufficient, increasing demand without dramatically expanding supply intensifies the crisis for everyone. Government policy helps create these pressures. Ordinary people are encouraged to argue with one another over who is responsible. Division keeps us distracted. In the past, the social divide has often presented as renters against property owners. Now, a growing population of people without conventional housing, has been added beneath both groups. This creates another layer of separation. Homeowners against renters, renters against homeless people, working people against welfare recipients, citizens against immigrants, and urban residents against tent communities. People spend their energy complaining, debating, blaming, and defending their side. Meanwhile, the larger economic structure continues changing around them. The middle class is steadily being eroded. A person may live in a $1 million house or condominium, yet still owe an enormous mortgage extending 10, 20, 30 years into the future. That person may appear wealthy on paper while remaining one job loss, illness, divorce, interest rate increase, or financial emergency away from losing everything. That is not the financial security traditionally associated with the middle class. A stable middle class once meant that people could own their homes outright, maintain savings, raise families, and live reasonably well without being crushed by debt. How many people can genuinely say they have that security today? Far fewer than the encouraged to believe. As the middle class disappears, more people move towards housing insecurity. Some become renters, some live in vehicles, some camp, some rely on relatives, some enter shelters, some end up on the street. The categories may appear separate, yet many of them are much closer to homelessness than they realize. Repeated failure is a policy choice. Governments collect an enormous amounts of money through income tax, sales tax, property tax, fuel tax, fees, permits, license, fines, and countless other forms of revenue. Citizens are repeatedly told that shortages prevent governments from providing adequate housing, addiction recovery, infrastructure, and public services. At the same time, enormous salaries, administrative budgets, consulting contracts, bonuses, and institutional expenses continue. This raises the fundamental question: where are the priorities? My view is that government bureaucracy has caused much of the problem and continues to maintain it. I no longer see every policy failure as an innocent mistake or administrative blunder. When the same policies repeatedly produce the same destructive outcomes year after year, decade after decade, we have to consider the possibility that the outcome is serving the system as it was exactly intended. I believe there are long-term political and economic agendas that benefit from instability, dependency, class division, and the erosion of national prosperity. Homelessness has become another tool which fear and separation can be increased. This is my interpretation based on what I have witnessed and experienced. I present it as my position rather than as a claim that every individual working in the government shares the same intention. The distinction matters. People inside the system may genuinely want to help. The highest level structure, however, continues producing conditions that make the meaningful improvement increasingly difficult. What a genuine solution could look like? Solving homelessness requires far more than dismantling tents, disrupting temporary payments, or managing addiction indefinitely. A serious response would begin by recognizing the different reasons people become homeless and creating different pathways for each situation. People experiencing addiction need comprehensive recovery opportunities that help them become free of dependency rather than permanently maintaining it. People capable of working need training, employment, and opportunities to help construct the housing and communities they will eventually inhabit. People seeking nomadic or off-grid lifestyles need safe, legal, environmentally responsible places where they can camp without being criminalized simply for lacking conventional housing. Communities need sanitization, clean water, waste collection, fire safety, healthcare access, and agreed standards of responsibility. People with direct experience of homelessness need to participate in designing these programs. Most importantly, housing and land must stop being treated solely as financial commodities. A society capable of building luxury towers, government offices, stadiums, shopping centers, and countless vacant investment properties is capable of creating secure spaces for human beings to live. The absence of these places is a decision. We must examine the system that created the crisis. Homelessness is usually presented as a problem caused by the homelessness. Let me repeat that. Homelessness is usually presented as a problem caused by the homeless. They are blamed for their addiction, their tents, their garbage, their inability to maintain employment, their unwillingness to conform, or their dependence upon public assistance. Personal responsibilities remains parts of the conversation. Every person has a choice to make, and harmful behavior must be addressed honestly. Yet personal responsibility cannot be the excuse for ignoring institutional responsibility. We must examine the healthcare system that introduced addictive medications. We must examine drug policies that maintain dependency without creating sufficient pathways towards freedom. We must examine housing policies that turn shelter into an investment vehicle. We must examine park and land regulations that leave people with almost nowhere legal to exist. We must examine economic policies that have buried families beneath decades of debt. We must examine governments that continue increasing the population without sufficient housing and infrastructure. We must examine the bureaucracies that receive more funding as the problems they administer become worse. My stand is clear. Government bureaucracy has played a central role in creating this crisis, and I see no convincing evidence that those at the highest levels genuinely intend to solve the problems their policies have orchestrated. Real solutions would reduce dependency on those bureaucracies. They would restore skills, dignity, independence, community, and access to land. They would give people the ability to build homes rather than to merely apply for assistance. They would help people recover rather than remain permanently managed. They would create lawful spaces for responsible alternative living rather than forcing everyone into overcrowded cities. They would reduce homelessness instead of expanding the administrative systems built around it. Perhaps the greatest threat to the current system is not homelessness itself. Perhaps it is the possibility that people might begin to recognize how deliberately their choices have been limited and start creating communities in which every person has the opportunity to live, contribute, heal, and belong. Thank you so much for sharing your time and attention with me. I apologize if the wind kicked up a little bit while I was doing this. As I said, this is simply just me reading an article that I published today on Substack. If you have the opportunity to go over to that article when it is put in the comments, please share it as much as you can, as well as share this video, because it's only through an engagement together that we start changing the world for the betterment of everyone that we love, everyone we know, and even those people we don't know. If we can all share more and bypass all those limitations or those limiters that have been placed upon us, and we can break through, all of this, well, I'll say limitation again, I can't think of a better word, then we can have that world that we truly would prefer to exist in. So thank you so much for sharing your attention with me. I look forward to reading comments in the video after it's been published. I will, of course, go over and see what type of comments were left in the live stream, although often I find that there are none, or there's a lot of bots that are talking sometimes, saying silly things. So Nonetheless, I'll take a look. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. And as I said, please share. Have a great day.